I feel extraordinarily privileged to be here and to share with you what I have been learning for the last 5 years. I've really been having wonderful conversations with people over the last few days, and I want to certainly say thank you to Stephen Shore for putting this together, and to everyone who's participating, and to all of you for coming. In fact, I feel extraordinarily privileged just to be alive right now. And I was born in New York in 1960, and I've always had electricity, a refrigerator, a car in the family. I've had all of these amazing things available 24/7. And I don't know how to look at that other than as an extraordinary privilege. At the same time, I was born to a mother who was drugged unconscious for my arrival. Both of my parents smoked from my conception. I wasn't breastfed. And as I often say, there is nothing special about my birth. But compared to other mammals, if you had any kind of animal born like that, that would be a recipe for disaster. So, like if you separate the mother and infant at birth with puppies, for example, the mother will reject the puppies. And yet that's our standard practice. And I'm saying this because it's about technology. It's our thinking that we know technologically that we can do things better than nature. And then we get into a lot of trouble when we do that. It's all with the best intentions. So I see all of this in the same frame. I do not know how to survive without electricity for more than a few days. I don't know how to survive without a fridge, a phone, or a car. And I have never had a cell phone, but just any kind of a telephone. I don't know how to survive without one for a few days. I certainly would not be here without the internet. I wouldn't be here without the lighting and the microphone and the filming, all of it. So that means that I am completely part of the problem. And I consider that awareness good news. There's a retired professor of management from Boston University, Bill Torbert, and he says, unless you are aware that you are part of the problem, you can't be part of the solution. So, let me announce myself again. I am completely part of the problem. So my new book, which will be out in a couple of months, in April 2019, it's called Our Web of Inconvenient Truths. It's the internet's energy use, toxic waste, and what else I'm sorry, I'm blanking. The internet, energy use, toxic waste, and climate change. And I'd like to read to you the opening from the book. It's not possible to send a text message or an email, take a selfie, watch a video, participate in a video conference, buy anything online, store food in a smart, energy-saving Internet of Things connected refrigerator, drive a zero-emissions hybrid or electric vehicle, do a GPS search, or even power a home with renewable solar panels or wind-powered energy, without extracting from the earth hundreds of minerals, elements, and compounds, including coal, copper, quartz, coltan, cobalt, lithium, neodymium, oil, petroleum coke, and fracked natural gas. Behind every flip phone, smartphone, tablet, smart appliance, and e-vehicle, there are hundreds of refineries, CO2-emitting coal-powered electric plants, nuclear plants, chemical plants, steel mills, cement kilns, metal smelters, wood chips harvested for smelters from tropical forests like the Amazon, and factories of all kinds. To keep running, each energy-guzzling, toxic waste-emitting, and greenhouse gas-emitting operation depends on all of the others. They interconnect by a network of electric substations, power lines, natural gas pipelines, cargo ships, trains, trucks, shipping lanes, railways, highways, telecommunications access networks, and data storage centers to form one gigantic global super factory. In other words, each and every manufactured item and online activity are end products of all the industries and infrastructures in the entire world combined. Calculating the size of a household's carbon footprint is therefore like adding up your monthly bills. Like if you add up your monthly bills to calculate your carbon footprint, that's like estimating the mass of an elephant by weighing only the tip of its tail. To date, carbon calculators do not account for the energy or toxic waste embodied, check that word, embodied in every new product, or the resources used to keep the global super factory going. They don't include the power demands of infrastructure for cellular communications, internet services, or the electric grid itself. They show only a fraction of a household's total environmental impact. Becoming aware of these inconvenient truths is a very personal experience. Questioning our assumptions about the internet and decreasing our footprint require collective action. Thank you for taking that in. I need to go next. I'm going to go back to 1862, when a British economist named William Jevons wrote a book called The Coal Question. So by then, the Industrial Revolution had started, and farmers were being lured, is a simple, kind word for saying what was going on, into urban areas away from their land in order to serve the industrialists who were manufacturing denim jeans and treadle sewing machines and fry pans and guns and the things that started the Industrial Revolution. And everyone began talking about something called energy efficiency. So it was much more efficient to buy a shirt that was factory made than to loom the cloth yourself and make the shirt yourself, if you had the money to buy the shirt, which enough people in Europe had the money to make it profitable for manufacturers. What William Jevons figured out is that energy efficiency actually causes increased energy consumption. because when you make hundreds of thousands or millions or now billions of a product, that requires a lot more energy consumption, a lot more mining of natural resources, a lot more shipping of those resources to the smelters, to the factories, and you begin to see how, because you've got one efficient product, let alone billions of efficient products, you're just increasing consumption in order to make it for a growing population. And of course, all of this efficiency helps us live longer, and the population increases, and so there are about 6 billion more of us than there were, say, at the turn of the century, and we're all using much, I think about, on average, 12 times the amount of energy that our grandparents were using. So energy efficiency causes increased energy consumption. There's another problem, which is that as the price of things goes down, like as the price of a cell phone goes down and more people can afford it because manufacturers can make it more affordably, more people buy them, which again increases consumption. These prices do not reflect the true cost. They don't reflect the environmental costs, and they don't reflect the social costs. If those environmental and social costs were in fact reflected in the price of the things we now depend on, no one could afford them. I'm jumping around here, and thank you for bearing with me. I think what I'm a writer and a kindergartner. I was explaining that last night, that I ask a lot of really fantastic dumb questions all day long. And the people I talk with understand that their job is to be patient with me because I usually need things repeated 17 times. But the deal is, if they can get me to understand what they're talking about, then I can explain it to other kindergartners. So, so that's what I do. And then I take all of these pieces and they fall together, kind of like a puzzle, until it all comes together. So I'm kind of giving you a bunch of puzzle pieces. I'm going to give you a couple of startling statistics that certainly startled me when I learned them. They're about the internet. So the entire internet traffic from year 2000, from the whole year in year 2000, is equal to 1 hour of internet traffic from year 2015. And now stay with me and remember the thing that I read at the beginning about all of what it takes to power a Google search or one email. So all of that has grown exponentially from year 2000 to 2015. Of course, it continues to grow, and sometimes I've read that the internet it doubles every 2 years. And along with that growth would be energy consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, consumption of mined material, including conflict minerals, and water, of course. In 2016, the semiconductor industry issued a report explaining that by 2040, we will not have enough electricity to power computers. So that means that either we drastically reduce our consumption of media, or nature will decide for us. We will simply not have enough electricity to power computers. Smartphones are also very significant here. So smartphones showed up in 2000, like around 2007, 2009. I can't, right now I'm not remembering. But when smartphones showed up, then everyone became able to go online all the time when they were standing in line at the grocery, when they were on the train, at a restaurant, whatever. The internet became available 24/7. And that also exponentially increased the growth of the internet. And whenever you hear that, growth of the internet, along with that goes growth of consumption. Smartphones' CO2 emissions will grow from 4% of total global CO2 emissions in 2010 to 11% of total CO2 emissions by 2020. That's next year. So this translates to a jump from 17 to 125 megatons of CO2 equivalent per year. That's a 730% growth. And by 2025, with all of the things I'm going to break down for you that it takes to run the internet, the communications industry could consume 20% of the entire world's electricity. I should also mention that our world now has more cell phones than toilets. We have more cell phones than toothbrushes. Basically, the internet is utterly unsustainable, and we are growing it. So let me explain the internet's main energy guzzlers. And no one has, well, there are a couple people who have compared some of them, like which consumes the most, but they're not, there's a big piece that has not been considered by most researchers, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So briefly, the four main guzzlers are access networks. Those are cellular antennas, routers, radio transmitters, and of course, certainly for cellular antennas, they all need backup batteries. Manufacturing those batteries, installing them takes tremendous energy. Then data centers, data storage centers. A lot of them are large enough that you can see them from outer space. Like in China, and even in the United States, there are some that are more than 11 million square feet. They are packed with computers that store websites and records and military data and all kinds of things. And in order to keep the computers from overheating, they need air conditioners. And the air conditioners take about 40% of the electricity consumed by data centers. In 2012, Greenpeace calculated that if data centers were a country, they would rank 5th in consumption of energy. I haven't seen any figures in 7 years later about that, but they take an enormous amount of energy. You can find data centers just about everywhere. They're in hospitals, at universities, banks have them, businesses have them, and certainly Google and Facebook and other telecom providers have them. They're enormous guzzlers. And also air conditioners take water, and they emit hydrofluorocarbons, which are more greenhouse gas. They're more potent than carbon dioxide in trapping heat. The fourth energy guzzler is automated processes. And that's like automatic backups on your apps. Like if you have a word processor and you know how it'll just automatically update sometimes, that takes energy. There also, websites are always backed up automatically. And then bots that send advertising. I read incredible figures that bots might take up something like a third of the internet now. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. So I want to talk now. Embodied energy is really one of the things that just knocked me out. And I want to describe one part of embodied energy. I've got this right here. That's the manufacturing of silicon wafers. And you can't have an electronic device without silicon. You've all heard of semiconductors, transistors. In order to process and store data and provide memory and apps, your phone will have low-power microprocessors, optical GPS accelerometers and other sensors, transmitters and receivers for cellular, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth signals, noise filtering microphones. All of these things require semiconductors. So they're made of special materials, usually silicon, that can control the flow of electricity. And transistors, which are the building blocks of computers, are made from semiconductors. Okay, so, and then the chips, the integrated circuits, those are made on silicon wafers of highly purified silicon. Okay. And in case you didn't notice, I was not designed to learn all of this stuff. I don't think any of us were, and here we are. So bear with me, and I'm going to share with you a little that I learned from a machine and process designer who told me what goes into making these transistors. So you begin by mining pure quartz gravel. Then you need wood chips, which is it's wood that comes from a hard, moist wood, typically from the Amazon. And then you need a pure carbon. Typically this will come from tar sands. It's called petroleum coke. It's a byproduct of oil. So these three things, the quartz, the pet coke, or the pure carbon, and the wood, are put together in, they're shipped to a smelter, which is kept at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 330 days per year. Okay, in order to keep a smelter at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit all the time, can you imagine the amount of energy that goes into doing that? If you interrupt the process, you'll blow up the factory, or you'll certainly lose the silicon. No one would want that. So that's step one, and out of that, you get metallurgical grade silicon. It's 98% pure. but that's not going to be useful for electronics or for solar panels. For electronics, they can only handle 1 impurity part per billion. Solar panels can handle 1 impurity part per million. So that means that the metallurgical grade silicon goes to a bell jar furnace that is kept at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we get the pure polysilicon that's useful for electronics and for solar panels. And I should just clarify, if you look at a solar panel and it has under the glass all those hundreds of squares, those are silicon wafers. And they can, to have an efficient solar panel, they can handle 1 impurity part per million. Okay, it keeps going through other processes, but you get the picture of the kind of energy that goes into manufacturing this, and the CO2 that's emitted in the process. Renewable energy cannot power these smelters and furnaces. You have to have power going 24/7, or you'll interrupt the process, and that would be very dangerous. I should also say, here's another shocking fact for me. Since 2013, manufacturers have made more of those transistors, those chips, than farmers grow grains of wheat or rice. So this is an enormous shift in our entire environment and our ecological balance and system, and we're unaware of it. If I shift to Rudolf Steiner, do you all know Rudolf Steiner? He died in 1925. He started biodynamic farming, Waldorf schools. He was really quite a wizard. And with Waldorf schools, he believed that every school should be affiliated with a farm. He noted in 1913, so by then there was already electricity, that you could use to light your home. And he was very upset with it. And he said, because of electrification, people will no longer need to think. And what he was observing is that if you just flip a switch on, you don't have to think about it. You just know, is the light bulb working or is it not working for me? You're just flipping a switch. You do not have to know about all the mechanics behind the walls and to the substation, and from the substation to the power station. And then from the power station, is there coal coming or fracked natural gas, or what is allowing you to turn the light on? So Steiner observed 100 years ago, we wouldn't have to, we would lose our ability to think because we wouldn't have to think. The other thing that's going on here is loss of democracy. So if democracy is about power of the people, along with losing, when we flip a switch to turn on an electric light, or to access the internet, or to make a phone call from a phone that you're sitting in a chair here without wires even that you see, we are wielding an incredible amount of power. And yet we're unaware of the makings of it. For me, then I lose some of my authority personally when I am not aware of what's going on there. In terms of the federal rules and regulations that govern all of this technology, starting in 1934, when we formed the Federal Communications Commission and the FCC defined harmful interference, which is anything that interferes with existing radio or TV broadcasts, and now internet or cellular services, and harmful interference has never included biological harm, as in it doesn't include nature. And yet we are nature. We are biological creatures. So we're living in this incredibly challenging situation if we operate by biological functions, and yet the engineering needs of our devices are protected, but not our biological functioning. And this has been going on since that was a federal regulation starting in 1934. So as long as most of us have been alive, how do we proceed with that dichotomy? We also have loss of democracy with the Telecommunications Act, which followed up the Broadcasting Act. So Section 704 states that no health or environmental concern may interfere with the placement of cellular antennas. It's interesting for me, with the research I've been doing about the internet's footprint, that would include, I'm assuming that includes, that also prohibits recognizing that we are using way more energy to power this thing than in fact is available to sustain it. But we have no regulations that would say, okay, you guys are going to have to limit what you're doing in order to keep it going for longer. We don't have any rules that respect that we have finite resources here. With 5G, fifth generation of wireless technologies, which will be, the infrastructure there will be deployed on public right-of-ways like utility poles. And municipalities, so far, according to the FCC, are prohibited from having a moratorium on these things. A municipality cannot deny the 5G small cell sites for any reason. This is not an act of Congress at this time, and we would want to prevent that from happening, because an act of Congress is much harder to change than an order from the FCC. I shared last night that you can, if you let your congressional representatives know that they want to vote no on House Resolution 7236, this would prevent anyone from suing, it would prevent telecom corporations from holding any liability for injury caused by their equipment. So basically, it would just give them carte blanche, which they already have. But anyway, we want to vote no on House Resolution 7236 and vote yes on House Resolution 530, which would render it, it would prevent these orders from the FCC from having any force or effect. So tell your congressional representatives, please vote yes on House Resolution 530. We've also got problems here with artificial intelligence, which is causing tremendous loss of jobs, and even personally, just loss of work. I'll say I completely orient by the work, and I say that with great pleasure, the work that it takes me to get through a day, like, preparing my food, growing it if I can, cleaning my house. All of those things, and of course, just about every job imaginable is now possible by a robot. So we're taking away our human interactions. And for me, that's also part of the internet's footprint. We're losing human know-how for how to cook, how to care for children, how to teach reading, how to heal ourselves, like how to make herbs, all of those things. So now we go to the question, okay, how do we shrink the internet's footprint? I have been collecting ideas about this from all over the world for quite a long time, and the ideas, I'll tell you some of the best ideas I've got, but honestly, they felt really lame to me. And then I thought of this idea, which is that if everyone could reduce their media consumption by 3% per month. So 3% is not such a big deal. My teachers, of course, said, Katie, how are you going to measure that? And I said, I have no idea. And they said, well, you can't, you need measuring devices to figure out how to do that. And I said, I don't have time for the measuring devices. Everyone's going to have to figure out what's 3% for you, what's 3% of reducing your consumption for you. I can tell you some of the ideas that are really great. So you want to wait at least 4 years to upgrade anything. You understand that every time you upgrade to a new device, or you acquire a new device, or you upgrade an app, you're engaging that global super-duper factory that, you know, consumes all of the Earth's elements, conflict minerals, compounds, all that stuff. So wait at least 4 years to upgrade anything new. You want to get wired. And there, the reason is because wireless technologies take at least 10 times as much energy as wired communications. So the radio transmitters use an incredible amount of energy. And so get wired. And how do you do that? That's an excellent question. Every community is different, and you're going to have to research it probably on the internet and ask around and see if you can get help so that you get wired. We will need to consider mobility as an incredible luxury. When you have a smartphone, just think of it as a luxury portal to the internet. It is, and I'm not saying to get rid of it. Of course, I would like that, but it's not realistic. But if we can think of them as luxury portals and move toward back to desktops so that we have internet access only in stationary places, that would really reduce, that would help start reducing our consumption. We want to delay children's access at least until they have mastered reading, writing, and math on paper. So you understand that when a child begins to use a device, they begin consuming at earlier and earlier ages, and that, you know, that again exponentially increases energy consumption and radio frequency radiation emissions for them. So that's not good. And now I'm going to throw in a wild card, which is that many people want universal access for all of humanity. So there are about 3 billion people who are not yet online on planet Earth. If we give these people access to the internet, which would be fair, we will exponentially increase consumption of electricity, greenhouse gases, greenhouse gas emissions, conflict mineral consumption, water consumption. You understand how that would be a disaster ecologically. But how do we reconcile that? Do we say, well, we can have what we've got, you can't have it? So, but then the other alternative would be that we who have access now will have to drastically reduce our consumption, our media use, so that people who say don't have toilets, which is an enormous part of the population in much of the world, so that they can have toilets and then so that they can have internet cafes. How are we going to balance that out? How will we be fair with that? How will we move toward fairness? Some other ideas for reducing our footprint. We want to pressure manufacturers to build repairable modular electronics. So, like if your screen breaks and then you need to buy a whole new phone, think of all the energy that goes into manufacturing the other parts when all you really need is a repaired screen. So, and manufacturers will make more money if you buy a whole new phone, but if we're going to sustain ourselves a little bit longer, we want repairable modular electronics. You can delete all your old Facebook posts and emails. Those are just hanging out in data storage centers. And if you must have a mobile device, you want to keep the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth off unless you are using them, and keep airplane mode on. I'm learning that the newer phones don't allow you to turn things off easily. So before you buy something, make sure you can turn it off. And again, you want to pressure manufacturers so that we can turn things off. If you're a school or a business and you're able to make volume purchases, like you need 1,000 or 10,000 laptops or something, you have clout and you can pressure manufacturers and say, I'm not going to buy this unless we can turn these features off. If you are a web designer, you want to minimize videos, pop-ups, and slideshows. Anytime you have more data in something, that consumes more energy and thereby emits more greenhouse gases. So you understand, you want to simplify websites. If you are running a website, you want to link or embed videos rather than repost them. Because reposting them is just putting them freshly in a data center, taking more storage, using more energy, more greenhouse gas emissions. Manufacturers can collaborate with multiple companies to require suppliers to disclose all the chemicals and use safer alternatives. So again, when people or manufacturers have volume purchases, that's when pressure happens, is effective at making manufacturers make safer, more sustainable alternatives. And municipalities can take ownership of their utilities, water, gas, and electric utilities, and deliver fiber optics to the premise. So that would be wired access to every home and school. That would, we want to decrease use of wireless tech. Okay. I'm going to close by a question that a friend said I should talk about last week. She said, Katie, you must talk about what nourishes you while you compile all this information. And wow. I will begin by saying that I admit on a daily basis, as often as possible, which is often because I need it, I admit that I am powerless over technology and capitalism, and my life is unmanageable. And I mean that completely. Once I admit my powerlessness, and I admit that if I go forward and I say, I can do this, I'm lying to myself, I'm in an illusion. I just don't have that power. I can become aware of what's happening. And really what I need is, I need so many other people to help figure out, how do we realistically do this? How do we realistically reduce the footprint on what we have become utterly dependent on? I read a few months ago from this Buddhist man who lived in the 1600s. He wrote a version of the I Ching, which is the Chinese book of truth, and the I Ching considers nature the teacher. And this man wrote that he struggled to find mentors and teachers, so he had no fixed teacher. And so he considered everyone his teacher. He tried to learn from everyone. I would say that's the same situation we're in right now. Everyone is an expert here in how we can reduce our footprint, and everyone can teach us. And we all really need to listen to each other and to ourselves in order to move forward with this great question. I thank you all so much for hearing me out, and thank you very much. If there are questions, I'm happy to take them. Stephen has a microphone. Okay, I see hands. Go ahead. Raise your hand so Stephen can give you the microphone.
Point who you want me to say give it to.
Pardon?
Point who you want me to give it to.
Point?
Point to who I should give the mic to.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the amazing way you collected all of that information and shared it with us. And I share your concerns very deeply. I can't sleep at night. I'm so worried about all of this. I don't know what's going to happen, but
Can you hold the microphone a little closer?
I'd like to ask you, cut back on phone use, correct? That means there are mobile phones. That means looking up on YouTube on the phones, making calls, doing research, reading articles, anything that has to do with these electronics. Is that correct? Or primarily when they're wireless, like a smartphone or whatever? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, good question. You know what, and I've got something that I didn't include, but let me explain now. And then, so definitely on wireless stuff, but let me answer your question. Let me try my best, and then you tell me if I've answered your question or not. It takes more energy. So if you send 100 manuscripts that are each 100 pages long, like, typed print, that is less energy than a photo. So a text takes less energy than voicemail. Voicemail takes less energy than a photo. A photo takes less energy than a video. Blu-ray video? That is much more dense, right? Like the data, there are tons more pixels in there, so that's going to be more energy than, like the high definition stuff takes more energy than what's the rung before Blu-ray or high definition? But you understand what I'm saying. So Skyping uses more energy than plain talk.
Right. So,
Okay? So if you, I'm a grandparent and I have, and so I know about what happens if you don't have FaceTime with people who don't live in the same house with you. So people have become, they say, well, there's a lot of benefit from FaceTime with grandchildren, but you see how it's consuming more energy if you're Skype than if you just do talking. Now, but let me also say, so supposedly I know I have a corded telephone, and it doesn't require any extra electricity to operate. Like I don't have to plug in extra electricity. And supposedly it's a landline. But I don't really know for sure. I think it's probably powered by a bunch of satellites. And there's every system now is, we're not on pure copper legacy landline anymore. I don't know maybe there are some places, but I really have my doubts. So I don't know what's, there's a lot of I don't knows there. And the stuff is changing all the time. But hopefully that list that I gave you, that the more data involved, the more energy you're going to consume. And upgrading really takes all the embodied energy that it takes to manufacture the new thing that you're buying. So you want to focus on not upgrading.
to make it easy access, we could say simplify and minimize use and simplify use of electronics, especially wireless,
So I would say,
across the board.
And another way that one of the people I talk with regularly said to me was, you want to figure out what is essential and use much less of everything else. Mm-hmm. And so try a little bit. Start with 3% a month.
Well, whatever, just cut it back as much as you can.
Okay.
I think that makes it easy access for everyone. The other thing is I have automatic upgrades that happen on my computer. I'll be working and all of a sudden, boom, and it starts upgrading. I didn't even ask for it.
Right.
I don't even know how to stop that.
We are all at the mercy of forces beyond our control.
Well, and you said link or embed rather than post. What were you talking
Rather
about there?
than repost.
What does that
So
mean?
like do you have a website?
No.
If you have a website and you really like hearing Katie Singer speak today, and you say, watch this video, if you get a copy of the video and you put it on your website, then the data center is going to store it, even though Real Truth Talks is already storing it. So you would instead just link to Real Truth Talks copy of this video. So then it's only stored once.
So to simplify it, rather than storing an entire item,
And storing
just
it
send a link
multiple
instead.
times.
Just send a link.
You instead of storing it multiple times, we are only storing it once. But there's a problem with that, which is that if you have a video that you really, really like, that's giving you information, it could be from the New York Times, it may disappear.
Right.
Let's go to other questions.
Well,
Thank you.
one last question, please.
Okay,
You
go
know,
ahead.
I like to watch these YouTube talks and then save them on my desktop.
So then that means you are reposting them, and they are
That's
being.
what I wanted to know.
And that means, so when you save them on your
Thank
own
you.
desktop, then they're being restored, but they're being stored again at the data center, which is using more energy. Yeah.
Thank you.
The comment you made about, trying to save 3% of your energy, we would save the 3%, and I wouldn't say a great pain to ourselves, But while we're saving that 3%, the bigger entities are just using the 3% that we're saving because you said we're going to have an unlimited supply. And you didn't mention NSA as, one of the major energy
Absolutely.
gobblers. And what is your feeling about letting our legislators know that we don't want them collecting all that data? And I don't know how I would phrase it to them, but maybe you can tell us.
Thank you. Are you answering her?
Yeah, I'm going to try to answer. So there's certainly controversy, and I'm going to go around the block. There's certainly controversy about climate change. And it doesn't serve me to have arguments about whether it's caused by human behavior or not. As far as I can tell, we're in agreement that about energy consumption, that we have limited energy supplies. And I don't know if I made clear that, like all of this, when I was describing the process for manufacturing silicon wafers, that takes a profound amount of energy. But we're not told that. Everyone said, get renewables, and you can have a green life, and you can have a jacuzzi, sauna, and you can have all these devices and not feel guilty about your energy consumption. And that would not be true after you learn what goes into manufacturing silicon wafers. And I didn't talk about what goes into manufacturing wind turbines, but it's also a pretty grisly process. So we're in agreement that as a nation, we have to limit our energy consumption, and according to teams of scientists, we do need to curtail our greenhouse gas emissions. So that's an assignment to look at, and yes, all of this data that's being collected by smart meters, like they will blast, 10,000 times in a day. Each of those transmissions is sending data about one household that has to be stored somewhere. That's energy. Do we really have it? So as a nation, we also need to clarify what's essential. I'll say I haven't really thought your question through. I think it's an excellent question, and we absolutely need to be looking at it. And I'm just sharing, what's coming to me right now as a beginning frame for looking at it. And I do believe that there are people in Congress and our neighborhoods, and our families who are like, okay, let's look at these questions. My prayer is that this stuff that has come to me, when a lot of times when I read that opening statement, about the global super factory, people get enlightened. It's kind of a wake up. And everyone will say, whoa, I never thought of that before. But then the light bulbs, for lack of a better word, they do go off. And once you're aware of it, you're on, and you start asking questions like you're asking. So please keep it going. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Here's the microphone. Okay.
I know that your focus was more on energy, but do you have any expertise on these various products that they sell for protecting yourself from the radiation from the devices?
In how to protect yourself from radiation from devices?
Yeah, how do you know what's true or not? I've heard those things you stick on your phone or whatever don't really do anything.
Hun, can you talk a little, but yes, say it again.
Yeah, like do any of those devices work? There's those clothes, there's the little things you stick on your phone or your router. How do we make sense of that?
Okay. so I'll repeat the question that how do we protect ourselves from the radiation emitted by devices? I say I have no gizmo to endorse. And I believe in unplugging. So the first order would be to turn your Wi-Fi off at night for at least 12 hours. So I'm in this hotel, and behind the bed there are a bunch of, the wall warts, the little black boxes at the end of a cord. Those are switch mode power supplies. They're, there's nothing wireless to them, but there were about 3 of them plugged into the headboard of the bed I'm sleeping in this hotel. I unplugged them before I went to sleep. What a concept. And so I believe in unplugging. And certainly, again, turning your Wi-Fi off at night for at least 12 hours. If you can find, and in terms of device, like shielding, so the Environmental Working Group did a study, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, of the shields for smartphones and cell phones, and they found that the shields can increase your exposure by as much as 60%. So, and I know people who they had a lot of money. This one guy had a lot of money, and he spent $20,000 on $10,000 on 2 occasions, building a wall to shield himself from radiation that was coming from an antenna that he could see. He was unaware of antennas on the other side of the wall. The radiation from those antennas ricocheted from the other side of the wall he built into his house, increasing his exposure. He's a very smart dude. But there's so much going on. So in terms of shielding yourself, you have to monitor it constantly. You have to really know how to use the meters, and you absolutely cannot use any kind of wireless devices inside the shielding because they will ricochet. That's why you don't want to use in a car. But then how do you deal with a car? You buy an older car to begin with. Forget these newer cars.
What about GPS in
Huh?
a car? I mean, we all rely on the GPS in the car.
Okay,
that's my hang
and
up.
there's no question that using an older car, you're going to be consuming much less energy than buying a new car. Even if the older car uses more gasoline because of all the embodied energy in a new car. You follow what I'm saying? Then any new product uses, there is so much, there's like at least 90% of the energy consumed by a car, a phone, any of it, it's so much greater in the manufacturing of that item than in the amount of energy it will use in its usable lifespan. So we've been taught to think about, recycle days and rah-rah recycling and recycle all your electronics. But the waste at the end of a life cycle is a smidgen, literally. So I'm going to say again, try reducing your consumption by 3% per month to reduce your radiation exposure. And that's interesting to see how that dovetails, reducing your radiation exposure and reducing your energy consumption. Just try 3% a month.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but at some point you kind of feel like with recycling, I feel like I recycle while my neighbors don't recycle. There's people here who couldn't turn their phone off during the entire speech, and I'm going to go out of my way to limit my usage. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. It's really wonderful and eye-opening. I knew a lot, and I'm doing a lot already. My car is 14 years old. My clothes are old. I'm old myself. I recycle my my first food thing for lunch. But I did fly over here from Europe for this conference. And I'm also looking into solar energy because I think it's a good new thing to do. I've turned our energy usage in half just by simply switching off the heating and things like that. Not having the television run and things like that, it significantly reduced. You could save money even without switching an energy provider or anything. So it's little simple things that everybody can do. But what is the deal with the solar? That's what I'm especially interested in.
So the book that will be out in April, Our Web of Inconvenient Truths, I've got a lot more about solar there. There are multiple problems for me with solar. One of them, so the panels collect direct current, and then in order to generate alternating current, it goes through an inverter, which has to be manufactured, right? And then whenever you switch from DC to AC, which is pretty much all the time, whenever you've got an electronic device, that generates, that chops the current, the 60 hertz cycle or the 50 hertz cycle in Europe. And that is, like engineers would call that noise on the wires. So if you're a recording artist, you don't want that noise on the wires because it'll interfere with the recording of the music. Some people also have looked at how that impacts health, how that noise radiates from the wires behind the walls into the room. So it's a health problem. In Germany, there are inverters that are supposedly cleaner and that filter this noise. Those filters also take manufacturing and they reduce the energy efficiency of the solar system. I'm noticing that for many people, when they get a solar system, they think, okay, that justifies me having a jacuzzi or a new refrigerator or an extra smartphone or a stereo system or whatever. And so that's not helpful to the overall situation that we're in. Most in this country, I think at least 90% of solar systems are installed without a battery. So people stay dependent on the utility. And there are problems with that, and there are problems with having a battery because the batteries have to be manufactured, and that's usually a very toxic process from beginning to end of life cycle. So I'm not saying no, I'm just saying be aware of all of these things. I can also say, I live in New Mexico. We have a lot of sun there, and I've had a solar oven for 10 years. You know what those are? It's a black box at a 45-degree angle, just a clear plastic top. And I just put it in the sun, and I cook food. There's no electricity involved. It's just a black box with a clear plastic top. And I love it. It makes really good food. But even though I live in New Mexico, I find, okay, I only get usable sun from like 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in July. And then we get the monsoon season, and so it's really cloudy, and so forget it. I can't use it in August. And so I'm just noticing that, so in New York, you guys have cloud cover a lot of the time, how much usable sun can you realistically get? We're not going to get enough to power industry from renewables.
No, I think I agree, but we have a place in South Africa, and our heavy electric gates, they are powered by just little solar boxes. There is no way of getting a cable there, and it's been working for 14, 15 years. It does work, and I'm from Germany, which is the leading nation in solar power, believe it or not, and it's very cold there. I was just there. Yeah, it somehow, I don't know, it's wonderful what you do, and I agree with actually everything you say.
Well, just keep your questions going. Thank you.
Thanks.
Who else here has a question over on this?
Thank you. This is more of a comment than a question, and it's rather politically incorrect, but the bottom line is that the world has to watch population growth, because if there are fewer people, there are fewer people creating pollution, fewer people needing energy, and I speak from the fact that I'm an only child. I've been married and divorced. I never had children. And I try to keep my footprint on this earth very, very small. And again, that's my comment.
Can I respond? So okay, so there are two things, and this is hard, what I'm going to say. And I also have, biologically, I've had no children. And the fact is, there are almost, there's more than 7.5 billion of us here now. So we can't change that. We're here. And I'm just going to go back to what Bill Torbert said, which is, if we're not aware that we are part of the problem, we can't be part of the solution. So I hear you that you are doing what you can to keep your footprint small. And the more you can be aware of your part of the problem, the more we can learn from you. But if you tell me what to do, that's going to push me away. And so even though you have, as you have much to teach us, we need you to listen to us. Thank you.
I'd like to make one other comment. We have to be realistic about this.
Yes.
And again, I don't preach. I don't tell my friends that have more than 2 children what to do. But the world is at a tipping point, and we have to be realistic about this. And
What
again,
do you propose?
I don't know.
That's a good place to start.
Education, but the world is at a tipping point, and I believe that we're at this juncture, especially with the politics going on in our own country, we're at a juncture that is almost irreversible.
I have a friend who says, she said last week, I said, how are you? And she said, I don't really have enough energy for today. And then she, and I was like, I can totally relate to that. And then she said, I'm bargaining with reality. And I thought that was an incredible description of the whole world. We don't really have enough energy for what we're doing, and we are all bargaining with as a society, we're bargaining with reality. So as we become more aware of our own world, our own lives, and our own contribution to this extraordinary mess, the more real we can be about that contribution, then we'll see what emerges. I think there was one more question. Yes.
I have a router in the house, but that's downstairs, and I sleep upstairs. So is that radiation going up there, or how far does it go?
So the question is, how far does the router travel if the router is downstairs and you're sleeping upstairs? We don't know. You would need meters to find out, and you would need a bunch of different kinds of meters to find out. So I'm going to say again, get some 23-year-old to help you get a way to turn it off easily and then turn it back on easily. I stayed in a friend's house the other night, and she turned her Wi-Fi off because I was there, and then the next morning she didn't have her passwords for turning her system back on, and she needed yet another password for getting her printer back on. It was really quite a fiasco, and we were just giggling the whole time. So yes, you need 23-year-olds to help you. Thank you all so very much.
Steve.